Kadimai vale andi buan romo rangone alewan Domai bondo miri alangi langi ni uda Miri lele miri alangi langi ni uda Miri lele miri alangi langi ni uda Miri le miri
I feel as though I need to explain myself first. I met some of your alumni at another event earlier this week. I'm not going to name them, but it was either Aseta or Shireen. They're there, they're both next to each other. And I said, what does evening blue mean? I know it means, why don't you wear a blue bow tie maybe? And where was it? Because, was it you? Oh, sorry, it was Sufi. Because nobody will be wearing bulla. Thanks for that. Thanks for that tip. Nissan Bolivinaka. That's quite good. It's a good start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say, this is a great honour, and quite a surprise to be invited to this, to speak this evening, because as William has said, we're next door neighbours, so William knows me quite well. So, why did you invite me? It's a pleasant and mystifying honour, and I'm delighted to be here. And before I say something about leadership, about my leadership journey, which I've been asked to speak about, I'd like to say a few words about Leadership Fiji and its alumni, because as I look around the room, I realise that I know many of you. Some of you were in from year one. I'd actually written down here that I thought that the term was class mother and father, but Aseta now says it's head girl and head boy. But I'm sticking with class mother and class father. And on that basis, Aseta and Rajesh, Leadership Fiji couldn't have better parents, don't you know what I think? Yeah. I've met enough of you to know just how life-changing the Leadership Fiji journey is. You're all successful, not just in your chosen professional paths, but also in the contribution you make to wider community initiatives, to charitable causes, and to the importance that you attach to developing extensive networks of contacts. Leadership Fiji has become apparent to me in my 18 months here is a great brand. It is synonymous with innovation, dynamism, compassion, inclusivity, and integrity. And I pay tribute to its founders, William and Sufi, its management board, all alumni, and to Leadership Fiji as partners. I'm going to go completely off script for a moment because I didn't realise that Joshko would be here this evening, and Joshko has become a good friend in the 18 months that I've been in Fiji, and is one of the most impactful and inspirational leaders that I've ever met. And I think it's very fitting that he's here this evening on International Day of Disabled Persons. So could you put your hands together just to recognise the date? How was that, Veronica? A bit of a segue there, you see, completely off script. I spoke at an event last week about strategic leadership in the public sector, where I set out some personal thoughts on what leadership means to me. And I think that the what it means to me element is crucial, and what it means to you. Because there are many websites and books and leadership programs, I know of a few, that will tell you what you need to do and say, and how to behave to be a good leader. And these are all very instructive and very useful and very helpful in helping us to decide what sort of leaders we want to be. But for me, there is no step-by-step manual to leadership. If there is, I haven't found it. It needs to be personal to you as an individual and also personal to the environment that you're operating in. It should be the result of constant self-learning, and at the end of the day should come down to what sort of leader you want to be. It's not just about attending training courses and ticking boxes. Not that I'm suggesting that's what Leadership Fiji is about, of course. But I mean, at this stage, I've developed a habit. Sorry, Veronica. I've developed a habit of introducing a joke into all of my speeches. But to make the point about it's not all about attending formal courses. I tell a story about a CEO, a manager. Let's call him a manager, a section manager. Let's call him Paul. It's a good name. And he decides that he's going to go away on a bit of a retreat, a strategic leadership retreat. And he goes away and does his 5 days, and he comes. We've all seen people like this. I've been a person like this. We all come back with lots of great ideas, and we're bouncing, and we've got, oh yeah, let's do this, let's introduce this. And he comes back and he tells his team, right, from now on I'm going to operate an open door policy. We're going to be inclusive. We're going to operate a one team ethos. It's all about us. It's not me. So you come and see me whenever you want to. My door's always open. And then, that's great. Everybody thinks Paul has transformed himself. And the following week, a colleague comes to see him. Let's call her Jess. Yeah, let's call her Jess. And she says, Paul, I just wanted to come and see you about something. I've got a problem I'd like to discuss with you. And Paul says, oh, Jess, we don't deal with problems. We only deal with opportunities. This is an organisation about problems. It's about opportunities. And so she says, well, okay then, Paul. I just wanted to talk to you about my alcohol opportunity. Well, yeah. So it's good to be enthusiastic, but I think it's really important not to lose sight of the reality that people are at the heart of everything that we do as leaders. There's no single way of getting leadership right, but there are lots of ways of getting it wrong. And when I think of values that I respect in an effective leader, you all have your own views, but I think many of them are Leadership Fiji values, and I think of self-awareness, flexibility, boldness, humility, clarity, strong communication skills, integrity, honesty, transparency, accountability, empathy, courage, and community. I'm going to come back to community because I think that's really important. These are some of the values that resonate with me. But what is leadership? And in the Foreign Office job selection process, I'm employed by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, as we are now. We have a core competence on leadership. So whenever we apply for jobs, we're invariably asked at interview to give an example of when we've demonstrated strong leadership. And because we're all instinctively quite competitive, and we want to be selected for a job on a tropical Pacific island, for example, we perhaps often overburnish our credentials in this area. So I often think about what the most powerful example of leadership I can give is. And that's where it gets quite difficult if you look at the question narrowly, as we often do. So I sometimes, sometimes I feel as though I ought to ask myself, have I marched 10,000 men up to the top of the hill and back again, like the Grand Old Duke of York? No, I haven't done that. Have I swum through shark-infested waters to rescue a colleague? I haven't done that. Have I led a team of hundreds of colleagues to deliver on a prime ministerial priority? Nope, I've done that. But of course we need to think about leadership. We don't need to think about leadership, and we shouldn't think about leadership in this Hollywood movie way. We don't have to manage people to be leaders. We don't have to hold senior positions in our organisations to be leaders. We don't have to be uber confident, articulate and career obsessed animals to be leaders. But we can be experts in our particular field. We can be leaders in our communities, in our church, in our families. And there are so many ways to demonstrate leadership. To tamper with a well-known saying, leadership is in the eye of the beholder. I like that, actually. So I was asked to say something about my leadership journey. It's only another 2 hours to go, so don't worry. Is that all right, Veronica? Well, I think when it comes to my leadership journey, and I would suggest to your leadership journey, it's never ending. It's a process of lifelong learning, sometimes getting it right, often getting it wrong, and hopefully learning from mistakes and setbacks. So I'm going to try not to bore you, but speak a little bit about my leadership journey. So I came from a working class background in a rundown area of Manchester in the north of England. Neither of my parents had much of an education. They both had low-paid jobs. None of my family had ever been to university. Not only that, we didn't know anybody who'd ever been to university in where I grew up. So it's perhaps not surprising that I didn't go to university either. There you go. There's a surprise, eh? University of Life. But I'll never forget the support, encouragement and confidence that my mum and dad showed me in encouraging me to join the Foreign Office back in 1986. I mean, the Foreign Office was an organisation and a lifestyle beyond their and my comprehension at that time. But they wanted me to open my mind, spread my wings, move out of my comfort zone, but with the safety net of a loving family. Some of these things will be quite familiar to you when we speak about leadership, coming out of your comfort zone, taking a risk, spreading your wings. They showed leadership through their support. We both took a leap into the unknown together. And I think that some of the most impressive and memorable leaders I came across in my first months after I'd moved away from home to London to join the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, as it was then, were those people that listened, genuinely listened. I was shy, awkward, clueless, homesick, terrified. Everyone seemed so impressive, just like you guys here this evening. Everyone seemed so impressive. Everyone seemed to know what they were doing. Everyone just seemed so grown up, you know? And the people that took time to get to know me, that remembered my name, that took an interest in my background, that asked about who I was, how I was settling into London, that properly listened. Some of the folk were very senior and went on to be ambassadors in Tokyo and Washington and Moscow. They didn't need to talk to me, the most junior person in their department, but they did. And I still remember that, and I would have done anything for them. They were leaders. They were real leaders. I then embarked upon a lifetime of overseas service in Africa, Central Asia, the Caucasus, Middle East, Europe. William's listed them all. And throughout that period, I ascended the promotion ladder, quite slowly actually, and gradually took on leadership roles. And my first significant one being as deputy head of mission in Tbilisi in Georgia, in the former Soviet Union. And I suddenly found myself for large periods of time being chargé d'affaires, responsible for the leadership of about 20 or 30 staff, I remember, and responsible for the bilateral relationship with Georgia and Armenia. And I think I probably knew it at the time, but I was completely out of my depth. Why? Because I don't think that I was ready. I pretended to be fearless, I pretended to be self-confident, but I worried constantly about what people thought about me. And I think that I learned at that time that you cannot lead and inspire if you don't know yourself. And you can't be yourself if you don't know yourself. I think that makes sense. And if you're not yourself, it gets even more complicated. And if you're not yourself, you'll present a false image of yourself, and actually, most people will see through this. So I suppose what I'm saying is you need to be genuine, and I don't think I was genuine at that time. So I continued to inch my way up the greasy promotion pole. I had team leadership roles. I continued to grow in confidence, slowly, but I still made regular mistakes and constantly fretted that I had said the wrong thing, or made the wrong decision, or upset colleagues. But I'll be absolutely honest that, and I'm being, coming back to my earlier point, I'm being genuine now. that it was not until I arrived in Fiji last year that I feel that I started to see myself as somewhere near ready to be a leader, as a diplomat, but also as a person. So I have an acting High Commissioner title at the moment. I lead a large team. My photograph regularly appears in the newspapers. I post silly photographs on social media. Some good ones, though. But actually, none of this is what I mean when I say that I'm getting closer to being the kind of leader that I want to be. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a community leader. I'm not Fijian, so I don't think it's appropriate for me to claim to be a community leader here in Fiji. What's this called? This cummerbund. It's falling down. The cummerbund, isn't it? It's falling down. Thanks for the advice. But there are a few things in my long career. There are fewer things in my long career that I'm prouder of than the contribution that both Jess and I have made to charitable causes in Fiji. So whether it be raising funds to buy a colposcope to prevent cervical cancer, dressing up as Superman and pushing a wheelbarrow around Albert Park to raise money for the Frank Hilton organisation, or having my head shaved to raise money for WOW's Kids Fiji. I've come to the conclusion that the most personally rewarding and effective act that I can do to make a difference is to use the social media profile and network of contacts that I have to highlight causes that matter to me. And talking about social media profiles, I'm going off script again, sorry Veronica. Somebody said to me earlier that you are in a competition, Paul, as to who has the greatest social media profile in Fiji. Is it either you or John Apted? No way. There is no way that I can compete with my bush. My bush. No way. Johnny's the king of Facebook, but I'm the prince of Twitter. My bush. I've lost my space now. So giving of our personal time and effort to help others is, to my mind, the most important way that we can demonstrate leadership. For the reality is that whichever country we live in, and I include my own country in this, we developing or underdeveloped countries, acts of charity, community engagement will always be needed to raise awareness, raise funds, ease suffering, cure disease and save lives. And I know that community leadership is a key element of Leadership Fiji's programme. We've heard about that this evening already. I mentioned earlier that so many, probably all Leadership Fiji alumni, have become community leaders and influencers. You're a great example of selfless service to society, and I've no doubt that without the leading contribution that so many of you make in your communities, more people would today be sick, starving, homeless or dying. And I'd like to conclude by citing a particularly inspirational act of leadership that I heard recently, last weekend actually, when I hosted an event to mark Transgender Remembrance Day. I met a woman, I was actually going to name her, but I don't think that I should, so I'm going to call her Jess. There you go. I met a woman called, very imaginative, I met a woman called Jess who runs a homeless shelter in Lautoka. And Jess grew up on the streets herself, the target of regular violence, including sexual violence. And Jess managed to purchase a plot of land in 2019. So the shelter started off with her and two others living in a 3-person tent on this land, a 3-person tent. Things are improving slightly, and the shelter received funding from a foreign embassy recently to pay for solar panels so that they now have some electricity. A Fijian family in the UK donated money so that they could build a basic shack of corrugated iron and tarpaulin. They still have no running water, and so they have to bathe in the creek. And Jess, nearly named her then, Jess works as a sole trader in the market and puts everything that she earns into the shelter. She has very little, but everything that she has goes towards helping desperate men, women and children who've nowhere else to go. And I was struck by the variety of people who've sought refuge in her shelter, She takes in everyone in need, from sex workers to families who cannot make wages stretch to cover rent, to university students who cannot cope with the stresses of university life. And her mission is not only to give them refuge, but to try and help them sustain themselves by building their confidence, help them find employment and a more permanent place to live. She seeks no reward and no recognition. And I quote, "I just want to help. I just want to stop people having to go through what I did," she said very humbly. Ladies and gentlemen, if that is not inspirational leadership, then I don't know what is. Thank you very much for your attention. Naka Vakalevo, and congratulations to all of the